right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, September 4th. We have got a short and sweet demo for you today. We're going to talk a couple of things about the released Wash 0.32, and then talk a little more about like runtime engine tuning, which should be a pretty fun one. And then after that, we've got a good first issue of the week, or at least a call out there to point at documentation page of the week. And then we can talk a little bit about the upcoming wasmCloud Innovation Day, which is going to be a great time. And we'll get to that. We'll do all the things in this call. So what I wanted to demo first was the newest addition to Wash, which will make it in the next release. This isn't actually released quite yet, but Aditya has been doing a good bit of work in the Wash CLI, well, for the past couple of months. But one thing that came up as a feature request was the ability to watch the output of some of the commands that Wash does. If you're like me, you're doing some wasmCloud development, you may be sitting here trying to take a look at maybe taking a look at the list of all the applications that you have. And as you're waiting for the status to change, you may just continually query this over and over. Same thing with wash get inventory, which you're just kind of looking at what's running on the host and then waiting for something to start and continually querying this. It works fine, but it can get a little bit old, such that some of you may have set up something like with the watch utility, setting something up so that it just continually watches. Watch is Unix specific though, and I think I had to install it on my Mac. These are the kind of things that just kind of get a little bit of annoying if you are going over and over on different development environments, or really like everybody hits this when they first start. So, what Adia has done has gone in and taken things like wash app list, which before I could use the watch utility for this, but now this actually has a watch flag, which will do the same thing as the watch utility. This will work in a platform independent way. I think it's using the cross term library in Rust, if folks are familiar with that CLI, which is super nice. And so this will work even if you're on Windows. And I haven't actually tested this yet, but the behavior that Crossterm is supposed to emulate for a non-interactive terminal is just continually outputting. So you could even set this up in some of your scripts to just like do this over time if you wanted to see the output over a certain period of time, which is pretty cool. For right now, the watch flag is only working on certain commands. So wash app list is one of them. And that one is actually released in Wash 0.32. But the new one, which Adi has been working on, is Watch Get Inventory. So this is super nice. The utility will query all the hosts that are running in the lattice, and then we'll query those hosts individually for their inventory. So if I take something like, if I set up a new terminal window, and I think really going to test the new wrapping functionality. That's pretty good, actually. It could be worse. And if I deploy the Rust Hello World application, we can see that this has automatically updated over here on the left with the new app that's running. We'll wait for a second for the this actually looks like it was me testing with a couple different components. So, it's kind of hard to tell everything that should be there. But if I do something, for example, like say wash up multi-local, which is actually a feature that Colin worked on. Thank you, Colin. I can start another host, and then at the specified interval, basically what happens, I believe it's every 5 seconds, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. We will query for new hosts and then keep track of those inventories as well. So you can see here over on the left, we now have my host that was running originally that has my whole application on it. And then up on top, we have my new host that I launched. So this is super cool. I'm running everything like super zoomed in the terminal, but being able to just go through this, and you can change the duration too. Hold on. Adit is actually in the call right now. So you can, how do you do that? You can change it, like watch like 5. That's awesome. Thank you, Aditya, for the live demo. So basically, this will update every 5 seconds now? Question mark. Yeah, that makes sense. I stopped the host. Oh, it's in milliseconds. Whoops. Then that updates very often. Okay, great. Well, it's really cool to see and it does actually, everything else is in milliseconds, so that kind of makes sense. It's really, really cool to see some of these utilities make their way into Wash. I know that I'm super excited to use it whenever I am working on I'm super excited to use it as I'm working on on wasmCloud generally. If I had to put in a feature request, I think Wash App Status would be a great one to have this because it shows like the automatically or like always updating status of the an individual application. But now that we kind of have this precedence for the watch functionality, we can just reuse that across the entire CLI, which is really, really cool. So thank you all for sticking around for a short demo of me shamelessly demoing the functionality that Aditya has been developing and contributing, but also a little exploration in how it all works. Do folks have any other questions or any questions about this functionality? I did see a comment. Jonas, you mentioned all the command line utilities for wash or like the flags, environment variables, instead of just taking something granular like milliseconds, use the human time crate instead. I think I've seen that one. Did you want to add any context there? Or do you want me to keep going?
No, I think it's just, coming from Go, you're used to being able to describe durations in more human-friendly units, like 5 seconds or, 5 minutes. It'd be just awesome if all the commands that took a duration of any kind would accept that as an argument. And that way, it would just make it a little bit nicer for folks to not have to know what the specific time unit is that it is in, but you could just tell it what you want and it'll do the right thing. That's all.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does it, if for the human times, does it default? Like if you give it like not a human time, like if you say like 1,000, does it default to something? Or is that not a valid time unit in Go?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how this handles that. That's worth tracking down. I would assume that you can give it a default unit, but maybe you can't.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You can probably configure it maybe for that, but this is a super popular crate. I think that it makes a ton of sense. And if you look at all of our command line flags for, at the very least since 1.0, we have tried. I believe we've done it in as many places as we could, but we tried to at least note, when you supply a flag like timeout, that you actually supply timeout in milliseconds. Like that is what we're using. So I think that we could do a lot of these as backwards compatible changes because you could just supply timeout and that is a human time. That definitely feels really nice, especially with Wash. Other folks have any other comments, suggestions, questions here? All right. Well, thank you so much again, Aditya, for contributing this feature. And thanks for keeping an eye out on the horizon for what can really help improve the tooling for wasmCloud, like the human time feature. I think that'd be a great thing to start kind of slowly transitioning different commands over to just for general usability. Feels really nice. All right, then we can go ahead and move on. I wanted to show you essentially the shortest release notes ever in the wasmCloud world. We did release Wash 0.32, I believe late last week. Yep, late last week. That really there were a couple of improvements and fixes on the host or on our crate sides, but really on the Wash CLI, we have some fixes and additions for the Markdown output, which we are using for our documentation now. We have a fix to add CLI styling to Wash, which you all actually saw, and you didn't even realize it, and neither did I because it was so intuitive. But now instead of Wash showing just essentially like all whatever your default text is in the terminal, we now have kind of colored output here for the for clap, which is super nice. It really just helps with parsing. I think I can see an example of this in wasmCloud because we don't have this yet. So, the difference in what you see is basically this kind of bolded output to the nope, to the newly colorized output, which is super nice. Thank you, Victor, for like noticing this and seeing that this was an easy option to kind of toggle on, or at least I assume it was easy. In addition to that, we just had I think a small fix on wash dev from Victor. So going from Wash 0.31 to 0.32 has some pretty minor additions and fixes. But in the name of being quick and getting the new latest and greatest out to folks, we went ahead and just released that one early because of the fix to Wash Dev. So folks can update now. I think it's released to all the package managers and everything. And looking forward to whatever we're releasing next. Does anybody have any questions on Wash 0.32? I figured this one was kind of a slam dunk. Not too bad. Got a clap from Bailey. I'll take it. Okay. Then I think we can move on to the next discussion item, which I really wanted to make sure to dedicate a little bit of time because you may have seen this go in a couple of days ago, LOL, yesterday. One of the changes that we put into wasmCloud was increasing the max linear memory that a component can use by default to 256 MB. Had a fun time reading about like the difference there. 256 megabytes, whatever, instead of 10. Now, depending on what you all have been doing when you're testing with wasmCloud, if you're using all streams, you're using all WASI interfaces, you're developing components in Rust or TinyGo, you may have not even known that this was functionality that would limit you. But we certainly have seen this when starting to work with other language tool chains that maybe compile in an interpreter or a runtime or a garbage collector, that you can certainly exceed 10 megabytes of RAM during the instantiation and handling of a component. Now, wasmTime has some pretty amazing functionality when it comes to allowing you to, well, wasmTime is a fully featured runtime. It's not just a thing that runs WebAssembly. And tweaking the engine is notoriously like tweaking any engine or runtime can be really overwhelming. I personally don't feel like I have a full handle on everything that wasmTime has to offer, but you can see in our wasmCloud runtime crate the way that we configure wasmTime. The memory pooling allocator that we use, the maximum execution time that we use for components, and then the main ones that you can configure in addition to the execution time at the command line is how many components by default you would allow to instantiate at any one time, how big a component can be, which we now have set to 50 megabytes or so to accommodate some of the larger WebAssembly components like that come out of Python and TypeScript generally are a little bit larger because we have an interpreter there as well. And then now, but the big change that we made here is upping the max linear memory for a component. So this discussion time is both to make you all aware that this change is being made. We're upping this memory limit and let you know that you can actually change this. You can set this on your own. So if you're running in a more constrained use case, you never should be using 256 megabytes in a single component. You can actually constrain this, but just like the scale, this is basically a ceiling instead of being a we allocate this much memory for a component. The default mode for wasmTime, I do know this after reading the docs, is that increasing with memory, you have to the component basically has to call memory.grow. That's something that happens under the hood, but if you're taking in, a 200 meg picture and trying to load it all into memory, then this is something that will affect that. So I set aside a little bit of time, and I do have a link directly here into how wasmTime is configured in this way, how I actually have it configured, which is the wasmTime store limits builder. You can limit the functionality of a component, or you can limit the resources a component uses in a couple of different ways. And the specific way that I did it was not linear memories, is here, the memory size. So we're limiting the component's memory size to a certain amount. Now, follow-ups to this are things like setting this value per component rather than a blanket value for the entire runtime. So every component in the runtime. This memory limit applies per instance of the component. So if you set a max memory of um, well, if your component allocates 500 megs of memory and you're running 100 concurrent instances, then that can start to add up. So what I also want to make sure is that this is set sufficiently low so that we're not just allowing bad patterns with allocating memory. So if you hit this limit, you basically should reconsider if you can maybe use a stream, something like that. Now, what I wanted to, I'm doing a lot of talking and explaining, but the real reason why I set this up as a discussion is I wanted to see if there are any questions, and I wanted to see if folks had any ideas for exposing some of these more advanced configuration options for wasmTime. There's a lot. I think that putting them all as top level flags in wasmTime in wasmCloud might not be feasible. I mean, there's a lot. So I have some ideas, but I wanted to see if folks had other ideas as well. Um, I think Masood had a good question. Oh yeah, Colin also.
Um, yeah, so memory.grow, is that for C, if I just do call malloc or whatever, memory allocate, will that call memory.grow, or do I have to do both?
Yeah, um I think Bailey responded if you use the WASI SDK. I think that's the idea, like allocating more
Okay.
memory when you like instead of that being the Linux syscall
Ah,
to ask for
yeah,
more memory, it gets proxied to the wasmTime runtime. Say, hey, give me
right.
more memory.
Okay, all right. So yeah, so using the WASI SDK, it's actually really tricky to know when things are um when the WASI SDK is actually getting called, at least with C. Um, because the file system stuff, it's not. Right. You have to use the file system um wait. I think Bailey might have to correct me on that too. But if you just do a f open, I don't think the WASI SDK translates that into something uh through the win interface. But
Honestly, at this point, Colin, after your most recent journey, I think you're more of a WASI SDK expert than I am.
okay. Well,
Congratulations.
that's sad state. Doesn't mean there
And
aren't other people who know better, but yeah.
yeah, I
Uh,
think Emscripten, they had different implementations inside their FS impls, and
yeah.
there it definitely did know to grow for those cases. I don't know about inside the WASI SDK. And also, we're
Yeah,
looking
it
for
would be
maintainers of the WASI SDK, just saying, if anybody wants in
yeah.
on that.
No, I know. They're not easy people to reach. But yeah, I mean definitely getting temporary file system, having F opens and stuff like that, go to some sort of a linear memory buffer. automatically would probably be a big help for some of these third-party libraries that just assume there's a file system. It's one thing to make a component, it's another thing to pull in a library like a PDF library that doesn't. Stay tuned for the KubeCon talk, or wasmCon talk, and maybe the KubeCon discussion if you're interested. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, Masood had a really good question actually here in the chat. Does wasmTime allow over allocation? So allocating greater than the runtime's max memory. As far as I know, I don't think so. Reading around the options for tuning reading around in the options, as far as I can tell, setting like max memory sizes is a pretty hard limit. There is no, I'm going to say this authoritatively, but anybody feel free to let me know if there is the option, but I did not see a soft cap. I think that that is certainly a useful feature in runtimes or in VMs to essentially allow you to like temporarily balloon over the memory allocation limit. But because these are pretty hard limits right now, it's pretty recommended to set this based on your workload size. This is, generally one of the challenges at the wasmCloud level because there's so many different shapes and sizes of workloads. It's hard for us to pick a reasonably constraining memory limit because the older limit, 10 megabytes, you wouldn't even hit even if you're streaming gigabytes of data through Rust. But you might hit it instantly just by trying to start a component in a language that we don't know about. So it's kind of hard. So I tried to err on the side of a reasonably high ceiling, thinking that you generally shouldn't be hitting this ceiling anyways. Like this is a true limit and is useful for when you are running on either a more constrained system and you want to avoid, which wasmTime may not even allow this anyways, if you want to avoid an out of memory error, or if you're running on a machine where you have multiple different components running and you want to make sure that there's essentially no component that's using up all the memory, things like that. Over allocation is certainly a problem. It's a little difficult. Again, picking this value, I look to past precedents around like Nomad and Kubernetes and AWS Lambda. Many schedulers and runtimes don't even set a default max value. And if they do set a value by default, usually they ask you. Like that's what Lambda does. It says, how much memory do you need? So I can see this getting tweaked up in the future if we see this getting hit pretty often. But the base bar that I want to meet for wasmCloud is that you can run a pretty reasonable workload in any language that we support, in our documentation, and you're not going to hit an out of memory error or an out of memory issue. And then from there, it's really up to the person running wasmCloud to pick reasonable values there.
Oh, hey, Ritesh performed the incantation to make me appear. So Ritesh was asking about wit depths and proxies. So the story here, because I'm literally working on this at this very moment, is there's a set of tools called Wackage for short, Wasm package tools. Let me get the link. So I'm going to hopefully be demoing this next week. I could kind of demo it right now, but I don't really want to have to like compile everything from main to do it right now. Wasm package tools is going to be the new way to do this. And Wasm package tools uses OCI and you basically use OCI so you can fetch it, which means you'll get all the proxy stuff that's already in OCI things. And so that will allow you to fetch from behind there. It also is going to make fetching dependencies easier. Brooks already did a proof of concept of this, which is going to roll into Wackage. I will pull that link out as well. Just gotta get it. There it is. Brooks did an example of this where it can actually just read your world and then fetch the depths, fetch the interfaces you need. And as long as you have things configured, it can do that pretty magically. So for people who have internal dependencies, which is quite common among people who've been using wasmCloud, you can configure it to point to an internal registry for specific namespaces and pull it from there. And it's pretty awesome. So yeah, this is all in progress. I'm basically going to take Brooks's code and put it into Wackage. So there's a timeline here of stuff going on. We're going to be releasing a version of Wackage probably today that is going to be the latest release and have at least all the core functionality. And then in the next week or two after that, we'll release another version that'll have this kind of functionality that Brooks is showing here. So this is about to get a lot easier from the perspective of most users. You won't need WIT depths anymore. It'll be using the standard OCI artifact stuff and things like WIT packages, which is just packaging up your WIT files into a component. And so anyway, pretty nice, but that'll be coming down the line soon.
Is it going to make it easier to support C? Oh, sorry. Never mind. Somebody has their hand up.
Hey Taylor, is this what's been used in that HTTP Task Manager example?
HTTP Task Manager example.
I saw a kind of a machine readable WIT manifest there, if you want to call it. There was a layer that represented the interfaces and those within that OCI package when I was looking at the spec.
Brooks, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, I was just gonna check. Masood, did you see this inside of the HTTP Task Manager, or was this in a?
No, it was in the layers of the OCI, and it was showing the input interfaces and import and export. So it had the WIT information included in that file. And so I wanted to know that I was asking Taylor if what he's talking about is related to that representation, because
it consumes that representation. So the representation that I was showing in Slack when you were asking yesterday, that is the representation that's used to store this. It's used to store both runnable artifacts and these interfaces, and that's stored in the config layer of the OCI image. The actual like binary thing that contains all the WIT is in there as a component, essentially. It's not a functional component, it just has the bare WIT definitions in there, but that's what's being stored inside of there. And so it's being like basically you have two things you can do. The stuff that's on the config is basically meant for rich data like type of thing. So people can look at the config of a manifest and say, oh, this is doing these things. And you can start to build like searchable indexes and stuff, because OCI doesn't have that built in by like in its standard, but a lot of people implement registries do have a searchable data store. And so that is that side of things. And then the actual representation of the WIT is contained within the binary. And Bailey's starting to get down the other thing I'm going to talk. I'll go back to that too. You didn't even have to phone a friend on that one, Bailey. I could answer that one too. Unfortunately, I know this. So yeah, okay. I'll dig into that. I tried not to go too far down the rabbit hole last week when I talked about this. But Brooks, what question do you have about the OCI stuff?
Yeah, OCI Wackage stuff. Okay, so just to maybe rephrase, so like with Wackage, I mean OCI is not the only way, but we are going to be able to pull WIT dependencies essentially as components from OCI. So it won't be like I believe like Ritesh's original question was around WIT depths having trouble through a proxy, which makes sense for like, basically making an HTTP request for a thing. But now we can use OCI. So like an OCI proxy or mirror, like we'll be able to use that. My question, Taylor, was how exactly are we going to use this in Wash? Because like right now, some of our examples, like we already have the width dependencies pulled down. So like no big deal. You don't always need to use width depths. And then in some places, like in our readmes, we'll ask you to do like a width depths update. Like what's the equivalent now with Wcage?
With Wackage, you have there's not that yet that's going into Wackage. Right now, you can pull down single things by their identifier. Um, but what will happen is Wash, we'll probably have a separate Wash one. So if you just want to update a dependency, you can do it, but it'll be run automatically by Wash build every time to check if there's things that need to pull down. And then it will use the package tooling to pull that code down. So we'll be I'm gonna try to make sure the code is reusable for anyone that can pull down this thing. You can say, hey, read a world, output the world stuff, and um, go from there. So that's what's going on with that side.
Nice.
It's next
Yeah, getting to
steps.
use that with wash build that's gonna be pretty sweet. Like it fetches your depths and then you have them. Cool. There you go, Colin.
I learned how to use it. I found it. What about for other languages, Taylor? How are we gonna? This is gonna change how we add languages to wasmCloud? Or is
No,
it still gonna be
so
width depthy and
no, because like essentially the core thing to remember is that every language needs a bindgen, and all those bindgen tools know how to read wit. Like that's the core requirement here. That's not changing. What this does is allows us to support. So, for example, in the future, what we're hoping for is things with like the tool chain, so like the .NET, the Go tools that are coming out, Cargo component, all the languages that have like first level support for it, we'll try to just delegate to those libraries if at all possible, in anything that we're doing. But for languages that don't support it yet, like for example, if you wanted to do Go right now and this feature had landed like right now, what it would do is it would populate the wit directory for you like it has currently. And then that wit directory would just be used by wit bindgen, just like it currently is. And so it's meant we're going to make it inside of like everything we do in Wash build, it is using the standard build tool chains underneath the hood. It's just making a nice bridge for some of the rough edges so you don't hit yourself on those rough edges. That's always what we do. So as soon as something gets like essentially Wash build just becomes a delegator to the tool chain as tool chains improve. Um, and handles the stuff like signing for you automatically as well. So like that's what this is
in the
going to do.
reactor type?
Yeah. But it takes care of like like when we're getting to the point where we don't need them anymore, but like the adapter step and all those things, like that's all doable in the normal tool chains. This just makes it all wrapped up into something nice. So we're going to make sure this is across all the tool chains. I'll give a full like overview of this once I have the functionality actually all in.
Thanks.
So the long answer to your short question, Ritesh, is wit depth is going to go the way of the dodo. And we're going to move on to a tool that has like all the support you'd expect with all the proxy things and whatnot.
Okay, thank you. So we are saying that we are moving away from width depths. We will not have to use it.
Yes.
So for now, I can just copy everything, right? All the widths manually.
Yeah. Yeah, you can copy the widths manually. You can copy the tarballs the width depths uses to something internal. It doesn't like any of those things will work for now. And then, I mean, and near term, this is 2 to 3 weeks. You should be able to start using this.
Yeah, thank you.
Taylor, you said you were gonna go into memory things. Did you want to do that, or did you?
I don't know how much people actually like. I can dig into like what's going on and walk you through where all that information comes from, but I think what we have in the chat suffices. Like you basically have 3 big options. You have the pooling allocator, which allocates a giant slab and does some cool memory tricks to avoid having to reallocate too much and whatnot. You have the dynamic allocator, which allocates, as the name indicates, on demand. And then you have limiters, such as the resource limiter, and that trait can be implemented by various things to make sure you're limiting to a certain amount. So all these tools are what we're going to be using in our toolkit to combine to make what people need. Some of these parameters will eventually get exposed, like what Brooks has been saying, like through a dam, through the host, those kind of things. So I can walk through all the different tricks and tips and things I've learned through there. But yeah, essentially, like you're doing like some low level trickery with having guard pages and things so you can omit checks, and there's some interesting stuff there. So
Taylor, you might know the answer to this one. All these options, like the using the pooling allocator, how much memory to use, et cetera, are those all flags that you can like configure the wasmTime CLI with, or like environment
you can
variables that are
configure most of
wasmTime
them
free?
with the wasmTime CLI. I mean, the how options work in the wasmTime CLI is a little bit janky. You specify a separate flag and then options, and then you can only get the help when you. It's weird. I mean, if I had my druthers, I would change that to just be a normal CLI with the different like things of options. But anyway, the embedded approach, like it's honestly easier to tweak all the stuff you need just to like hold down the wasmTime crate and then point it at a file and set up your engine and go. Like it's just that's like the way you've done it. So anyway, there are many, many flags. The documentation has improved quite a bit over the last 6 months, mostly because people like me have gone and bugged like Alex Crichton and a couple others probably one too many times about like, how does this little knob work? Because I don't quite get it. So just keep that in mind, that's there for you if you need it, the documentation.
Yeah, the docs have been super helpful. And like when looking at some of these options. Okay. Yeah, what I was really curious about, like there's so many knobs for us to turn here, and maybe we shouldn't be exposing knobs that we haven't found a reason to mess with yet. However, I think that like with tuning the max number of components, the max linear memory execution time, all of those seem pretty reasonable for us to expose at the wasmCloud level because it's like baby's first runtime tooling. Like it's the first thing you would want to touch. But there are so many options, and I think that it would be nice in the future, maybe possibly to have a way to like just set all kinds of wasmTime related environment variables just pass through, or use those to configure that don't necessarily make it into like um, the top level of wasmCloud. Just gets kind of hard because now there's things that we maintain and all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
So,
Taylor,
so
you raised your
Bruce,
hand.
we,
Oh
we,
yeah.
we then, if wasmTime has its own CLI, and then we control things from the wasmCloud side, especially for operators that use, let's say, want to tune it, shouldn't this be like a plugin to Wash that passes the commands to wasmTime CLI? Sorry, wasmTime CLI to
We
do
don't
the
use the
configuration?
CLI underneath the hood. So that's where I was getting to. We're using, this is making me think we should do after the Innovation Day, because we're making sure we have all the stuff ready for Innovation Day right now. Um, maybe a stream about like that just goes from like cargo new to pulling down wasmTime, using the embedded wasmTime thing in there, configuring all the options, like just basically doing what Bailey was talking about in chat, but live for people. It doesn't take a lot of work to actually do that. We can just do it like just schedule it and go for it. But yeah, we're not calling the wasmTime CLI. We're embedding wasmTime, and the wasmTime CLI is just a wrapper around all of those options, with a few extra like goodies, like wasmTime serve, that does like the automagical stuff for for serving an HTTP type thing. But like those are just all little CLI goodies. They still use the embeddings, which is what we're using. So Brooks, we can add that after we're done with Innovation Day. Bailey and I can get on and futz around in a stream for people's entertainment value.
Speaking of wasmCloud Innovation Day, everybody, if you haven't heard of it, we are going to be doing a super fun all-day event. If you go to wasmCloud.com, we have it kind of up here at the banner. This is going to be a virtual event that happens 2 weeks from today, which will pretty much be all day, reasonably centered with time zones. We'll start with the wasmCloud Wednesday meeting at 10 a.m. and go all the way through a day of presentations, tech deep dives, and then we will kind of wrap up the day with some time to all hang out in a virtual gather hangout space. We'll kind of all be in like a little virtual office. We can do some hacking. You can meet the maintainers. You can meet folks on the Bytecode Alliance team. Should be a lot of fun. And I wanted to mention it because I see a lot of folks on the call today, which is great. But then there's also people, watching along at home. So make sure you go and register for this one. wasmCloud Innovation Day, of course, is free, and we're all just going to be hanging out 2 Wednesdays from today. Should be a fun time. So don't miss it. All right. Yeah, especially you folks across the pond. This will be starting a little bit earlier, so it'll be a more reasonable time for wasmCloud Wednesday. Should be fun. Okay, I wanted to make sure that I caught the last couple things for this agenda today before we move on to the free time. But I just wanted to point out for the issue of the week, I did not pick one, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew about this page, which is really cool. This exists, I think, in any repo in GitHub. You can go to the repository URL /contribute, which hopefully you can see the little pop-up here. And it will actually, point you to the contributing guidelines, select all of the good first issues for wasmCloud. I think Jonas was the one who originally told me about this, so thank you, Jonas. But using this one unified dashboard, you can see all the things that we're looking for help with and that are good first issues in the wasmCloud repo. So I just filed a bug 53 minutes ago. That one's ready for the taking and great. And we also do our best to make sure that these are tagged with not just the category and good first issue, but what specific piece it touches in the wasmCloud ecosystem. And then where possible, we'll tag it with the language that you actually need to, that you'll actually be writing. So this is great for taking a look. The vast majority of these, touch on some bit of Rust code, but it's really nice with the washboard UI, for example. You get to write some JavaScript, some React. You might even get to write some Go here every once in a while. It's pretty fun. So this is a great page to take a look at for people who are looking to contribute for the first time. In addition to that, since there's not too much there, just wanted to point out the documentation page of the week, which is the Lattice protocol section. So this is a pretty interesting, possibly lower level than what developers generally need to know for wasmCloud. But if you take a look under docs, hosts, and then Lattice protocol, we talk about a couple of the protocols, the specs that we use for communication and for starting and stopping things on the wasmCloud Lattice. So there's a little bit more information about the Lattice name, the RPC layer. We now have pointers to the Bytecode Alliance WRPC project and the structure of a subscription on WRPC as a couple examples, and then how we're able to know where an invocation is going, where it came from, etc. with the headers. This is a pretty sweet page just for folks who are looking, and this is probably actually, I'm kind of curious. No, you will hit our glossary first if you look for WRPC. So that's fun. And then also on the control interface, this can be very useful if you're not using the wasmCloud control interface Rust crate. as a reference for what the structure of control interface responses should look like. You know, if you wanted to write your own client to run a provider auction, here's how you would do it. This is a great reference page, which is, you know, updated to 1.0 and has all of our latest control interface and RPC things. So this is a great reference if you're looking to see how, you know, Wash is working under the hood, or how the RPC subscriptions are actually working underneath. So take a look at this one, and I think that was all that we had on the agenda. So did our regular agenda, issue and good first, issue of the week, and documentation of the week. So looks like we've got a couple minutes of free time for if folks have any questions or comments or things from the general WebAssembly ecosystem we wanted to dive into. So feel free to just raise your hand if you have a topic. Yordis asked a softball question in the chat. What is the meaning of life? 42, done, move on. Anything else in the, you know, any
Now
other
the internet is gonna know
fingers?
that I'm a child, you know.
I heard something interesting, like an interesting opinion from an analyst recently. I wonder what the group thinks. What they were stating was that basically WebAssembly has fizzled and really not had much of an impact in the browser, but that all the real activity is going on server side. What is that somewhat accurate, or?
All of us
Sounds-
are like, well, hold on.
Yeah.
In the GUI space, like in the Figma, Adobe, that type of product has been extremely successful, though. I think that has been the biggest impact, I believe. Outside that product, personally, I haven't seen that much work.
Well,
Enlighten
start
me.
naming,
Enlighten me.
like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, Figma and Adobe stuff. Other
Right.
high performance applications like Autodesk stuff. So any of their
Okay,
things
we go back to the same thing.
High performance web apps.
Yeah, it's
There's
high
really no
performance
other
web apps.
option.
Yeah, I'm not saying that like Joe Schmo making his cat blog is going to be using WebAssembly, but like if you're building a high performance web app, it's very common to see a little bit of WebAssembly at a minimum, and sometimes quite a bit. And the people who are doing these things, like big web apps, have full teams working on WebAssembly.
I have a question. Is everything around Canva, WebGL, stuff that have nothing to do with the DOM for the most part?
Yeah, as far as I know, you're not doing a ton of DOM manipulation. This is what I've seen. Oh, Bailey has thoughts.
I have cool new news on that topic, but I don't want to line jump. Go ahead, Brooks.
Oh no. Um, Mine may be technically incorrect based on the topic. It is. It's fine. I was gonna mention like the companies like the Amazon Prime use case of like they're distributing an app to like a ridiculous variety of devices. So like using WASM to get there. But I think that's maybe server, whatever, embedded more than web.
Tiger Beater is the most fun one. Have you seen the Tiger Beater one?
Yeah.
That is the most like, okay, wow, okay, this is so cool. Yeah.
What was Bailey's news? Are we
So-
gonna have finally with IDL access from?
Well, I mean, if you look at the WasmCon schedule, you might actually see some of that on there. Yeah, there's two different cool projects that I think will unlock some more use cases. Right now, I think part of the challenge of why, you know, your random Joe Schmo doesn't use WebAssembly for their web app, and you see more like large enterprises that have teams to facilitate the development because it's worth the investment to them. Part of it is because it's really painful to pull in WebAssembly modules right now, because they don't quite behave like your normal ECMAScript modules. Guy Bedford gave a recent presentation on how to solve this from like the TC39 perspective, and I think that approach is going to really make that a little bit easier. So in that world, I think we'll start to see lots of little WASM modules versus like the one app module that we currently see in applications today. And so that's one cool advancement that I'm pumped about. And then yes, there has been an effort to create browser.wit that'll make it easier to interrupt from WebAssembly components and interact with APIs like DOM style APIs, which has been a holy grail for us for a while. But the reality is that when you're running in a web VM, the JavaScript API is so optimized for that. Like your loss from that was like just so minimal that it just wasn't worth the effort to try to do anything other than a shim there.
Right.
But back to answering the actual question, I think that it is heavily used for web applications, like Colin said, who would definitely know, being from Adobe, and is still heavily used there. And I did it at SAS. We had, a group of folks, but also mainly me, supporting the web app on that case. Now, it has grown, but it is a small percentage of the traffic. I think I read the same analyst report, and what they're really talking about, or like what I got from it, is that we're doing our job really well on pushing innovation forward and moving quickly now, finally, in the WASI and outside of the web use case. And so like folks are feeling the fire on that side, whereas the web side of it is certainly a lot more established. But the ESM work is one of those that I'm pretty excited about that's moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's really matured. I think other than like 64-bit, most of the feature requests are around just browser engine functionality that we assume would be made available to WASM. But yeah, I think the scripting API is really mature at this point. Well, we talk about 64. But yeah.
Is there anything in the mobile space by any chance? Like iOS and Android stuff?
The browser of the phones.
No. Outside the browser, I'm talking just like WebAssembly things based on WebAssembly stuff. No?
There's been stuff, but I've noticed that there is kind of this divide. Like what Colin said is, there's the folks that are using the web VM approach to writing their mobile applications. And then there are the people that are kind of using the the Porsche equivalent experience, using Xcode, using all their native SDKs. And that's like a really nice development experience. And I don't feel that anybody has, like, I saw approaches with React Native and a few others, but nobody's really hit that like perfect experience to supplant that approach. So if you're writing a mobile app and you gotta, yeah, well, yeah, there's
for Flutter.
There's that. Although Flutter, WASM support.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's kind of saying. Kevin's been a fan.
Well, I made some progress on the product buffer. No, with yes, product buffer to width. I'm gonna try to take my first time vacation in 10 years to finalize it. But let's see how it goes.
Let's go. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see that. Jordis, when you wrap it up or you get it to something you want to show, you should show it here.
Yeah, it's just like it's a rabbit hole because I have something in my mind that I want, a specific user experience, ecosystem that I want, and every time I open something, like, okay, I need this. Oh shit, there's nothing done there. I need to go down and down, and then started with even sourcing, messaging, and now I'm in there with schema registry. I'm like, okay, but I need this, otherwise this thing is like not that friendly. Yeah. I'm scared to open another one. Like, no.
Vance, what do you think of that?
Well, I don't have much optics into what's going on in the browser space, I guess. So I was just interested. Um, but I don't really care. I'm excited about WASM technology as this universal computing standard, right? That's the thing that gets me excited, and the what's going on in wasmCloud these days now that we've native wit and everything is just so on track with that. It's just it's very exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will say, I get a little bit of a pull up when I talk to the WASM CG chairs, who represent Chrome, Firefox and stuff. And sometimes they get a little down because they see that, like a significant portion of the usage is like crypto and like this like not so awesome stuff. And they're like, man, this sucks. They want general purpose compute too. And that's what they want to see. And all of them are super excited about the component model and that growth. And they want to see it take over so that they can put a fine point focus on it inside the browser as well. But yeah, I definitely feel like the fire and innovation right now is outside the web. And that's pretty wild because I remember those HTML5 days. Like dates me an extra decade, I think. Nobody
I
says
haven't
HTML5
heard that.
anymore.
Yeah.
Bailey, I wonder. I mean, I don't know what I'm saying, but like, could introducing a new content type optimized only for WASM mode as soon as I see it would be a way to break
I mean,
anything? Because we keep
it
trying to do
recognizes it
HTML.
right now.
Yeah, but like optimize everything around it, like kind of like
Oh.
who know JavaScript, who's that person again? Like the bindings are like optimized directly into the WebAssembly, whatever that means. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like I don't know what I'm saying. So
Yeah, I think the tool that I'm pretty pumped about is called Jaco. And it basically lets you take a component or sets of components and then unbundle them to core WASM and then shims them together so that it works well in the browser. I really think that framework could be expanded out so that that was something that was integrated with like your Webpack build for your app so that you're able to consume all your dependencies like up and down the stream and then you've got like a componentized application instead of today's world, which is like hand coupled with love by a person, and pulling all these things and making sure they instantiate the right way. I think you have to have some kind of like framework like that. It's definitely going to be written in Rust because it's weirdly seems like that's where the web is moving towards for all their build tools, is all Rusty. And there's no reason that Jaco and Starling Monkey couldn't be that next big thing.
but doesn't Jacob or whatever like create like an HTML and then load it inside, but still like HTML first and JavaScript?
You are always going to need JavaScript and HTML.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like maybe HTML yes and CSS, but how can we get rid of it like JavaScript in between?
Well, that's that web IDL, direct access to the web IDL thing that Bailey was talking about before. That's probably not going to happen because it's shimmed.
Yeah,
shims are really effective. But we do see we have a lot of WebAssembly and that are passing byte arrays to each other. We do see it isn't cheap. So we do try to consolidate. But yeah, I don't know. It still wouldn't even be cheap. It would still not be cheap if you had direct access to the WID IDL. You'd have to basically get rid of byte arrays being how linear memory being how WebAssembly operates, which isn't going to happen. So.
Yeah, Yordis, I feel like you'd be in good company if you hung out with the WasmOS people, the ones that want to write a whole new operating system that's just, WebAssembly based, and they want to write a browser that's just WebAssembly based, and yeah. One day, I think that could possibly happen, but, it's going to be a little bit.
Hey, I think why not? I feel that WebAssembly opened this like notion of distributed computing operation system, kind of. And I kind of like it. Maybe it's a time to go down one level again and then figure out, okay, what would have happened if everything was distributed from the get-go, whatever that means. I mean, that's technically how I think about it. wasmCloud nowadays.
wasmCloud is distributed
That's
first.
my distributed operation system. That's how I describe it to people, right? A good friend of mine is like, well, why should I take into, look into this? Like, okay, you know an operation system? Yes. Okay, now it's distributed. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, MapReduce was a big thing. That was a big word. What was that? Big table. I don't know. How long ago was that? 15 years ago? Same. It all comes back. All comes back around.
Literally what we were
Liam's gonna
talking
say
about
something.
earlier
Yeah.
today. Jonas and I were on a call with somebody in the EU, and we were explaining to him, that wasmCloud essentially deployed as like a big MapReduce operation. I mean, it's a horizontal and vertical sharding. And we sort of walked through the auto scaling across host and everything else. So I don't think that it was a big thing. I think the idea has just been adapted and to everything.
Yeah. No, it definitely, yeah, it's just, it's not like it went away. It's just, this is the next iteration of it.
What is the next iteration, huh?
But this is the next iteration. Oh, you mean what'll be after this?
Yeah,
10
absolutely.
years from now? I don't know, but I'm sure that all these people still will be involved.
Pretty sure Liam reserved Wasmos. Maybe you should have muted that.
wasmlist.com. This domain is open.
All right, on that fun note of positivity, Liam, did you want to advertise your domain for?
No. No, I'm gonna keep quantumlets under the hood for now.
Oh, yeah.
We can talk about that. We can talk about that in 5 years. That's gonna be quantum cloud.
Yeah. I'm sure, yeah, quantum, yeah, that's true. In 5 years, quantum will be due to make a comeback
Mm-hmm.
in the zeitgeist.
We're running quantum in the browser.
Now I want to buy a domain that is the opposite of wasmCloud, wasmDcloud. What is the opposite of cloud? That will make fun. Opposite of cloud.
It was such a good one. I just can't say it.
Okay,
Metal,
send it
heavy
to me.
metal.
I just like to thank everybody for having spent an hour and nobody has even alluded to artificial intelligence. It's such a great respite from my day.
I almost did it.
Now I'm just thinking of AI jokes. Yeah.
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 I'm about to go to other meetings and I gotta say, Wasm's the best way to run AI. Let me tell you all the ways. And it is true. But yeah, this is a nice respite.
We're just so cool. We're past it already.
True.
We're over it.
And maybe we're winning the analyst back away from AI taking up all the air in the room. That would be nice.
Gartner did officially announce us as a cool vendor.
Wow. The coolness factor.
Yeah.
Don't click that. Are we still recording?
Yeah, we are. Why don't we wrap this one up? All right. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. Great wasmCloud Wednesday. Great discussion, by the way. Thanks for letting me rant and ramble and talk about, tuning engines and runtimes and stuff, and validate that we're probably in a pretty good place now. So that's great. Don't forget to sign up for wasmCloud Innovation Day. That is coming up here in 2 weeks. And other than that, I guess we'll see you next week for the next big weekly meeting. Have a wasmCloud day.